Thank you, Chair, uh, uh, and distinguished audience. Very good morning. I think very important things is happening outside. I mean, the U.S. election and the results are coming out, so a lot of people are interested in that one. Anyway, the title of my paper is "Prospect of Economic Growth in Bangladesh." So, as you know, I think the growth story of Bangladesh has been, if not remarkable, is not unsatisfactory. I mean, at least to start with, we have been able to raise our GDP growth rate fourfold from starting with the after the independence. Managed to reduce poverty by half from 60% to almost 30% in 2010. And we are in course of attaining most of the Millennium Development Goals. But the progress or the growth rate has not been smooth. And if we start with, so given that this is my organization, my presentation, I will talk about four things. One is the analysis of the growth experience for the last 4 decades. Then I talk about the growth outlooks as prescribed in our medium-term and long-term plans. And then what are the major constraints that we think in the context of Bangladesh, and have some concluding observation. So, if, this graph actually shows the growth that we have achieved over the last 4 decades, and it has two observation. One is that Bangladesh has been able to improve its growth rate steadily over time. So from 1973 to 2012 or 11, and we can identify 2 distinct phases. In phase 1, which we call from 1973 to 1990, the growth rate was subdued. Less than 4% on average, which translates into per capita income of 2.2%. And the underlying strategy was more inward-looking policies, state control of prices and licensing, and heavy trade protection and subsidies. But we start with a very high poverty and also the war-ravaged economy. So this underlying policy was not sustainable, and we found out that we have to change the course. And later on, from 1990, actually started the middle of 80s, but started to give us result from 1990s. So during the second phase, we adopted outward-looking policies. A lot of reforms took place in the field of trade and also banking, and we started to get some benefit out of those policies. And as we can see that the average, the growth rate jumps to 5% per annum on a 10-year average. And more importantly, we in the later part of this decade, from 2000 to 2010, we are having persistently over 10%, 6% growth. And due to those things, the poverty rate reduction rate was much faster in the later part of in Bangladesh out of the 4 decades. Now, from the supply side perspective, in both cases, the growth was fueled by expansion of investment and also led by private sector, and also the expanding labor force. So basically, the factor accumulation factor was the driver rather than the productivity. The productivity gains were limited. Now, normally, from the economics perspective, sometimes we want to understand the determinants of growth. People do what we call growth accounting, exercises, and sometimes want to see the relative growth rates and also the changing structure of the economy in over time, as well as comparing with other countries. And in these 2 graphs, we are showing the relative growth rates of 3 sectors or 3 activities, basically agriculture, manufacturing, and services. And on the right-hand side shows that the changing structure of the economy of Bangladesh. Now, what we see from this one, the growth dynamics was largely provided by the modern manufacturing and service sector, as just told by the chair. And agriculture was a drag on the growth rates. It grew less than 3% on average. Manufacturing service both grew faster than the overall GDP growth rate. Manufacturing growth was fastest, 6.4%, and the service grew at 5.4% annually. But still, so not bad. And then on the structure of the economy, we are seeing some structural change. The services continue to increase, and then the manufacturing is catching up. You can see at the expense of the agriculture sector. So the manufacturing share started to grow, and it is now almost a 20% of the GDP, and the agriculture sector is actually is falling. Agriculture share is falling. Now, if we look, if we compare our structure of the economy with the rest of the world and also the East Asian country, then we found that, okay, maybe we are not doing that great. If you look at our structure is strikingly similar to the structure of most of the low-income countries, where we yet to transit to a modern manufacturing and service-oriented economy. Mind you, even the service sector is providing 50% of GDP. It is mainly informal. The 78% to 80% are informal services. It's not a well-paid service sector. So that is also, I think, found in some of the least developing countries. I'm not sure about other countries, but I think it's also the case in Pakistan and Nepal or something like that. But if you look at the China, Malaysia, and East Asia, the manufacturing, the contribution is 30%, where we have only 18 to 17%. So we need to do much better to go to that level. Now, so we have a mixed story. On the whole, one can say that we have done reasonably well, but could have done much better. So, but I think the growth dynamism and also the change structure of the economy, and also one thing I didn't spell out, that we are nearly self-sufficient in rice production. So given those things, the policymakers in Bangladesh as well as people tend to believe that we can move to a higher growth trajectory. And this has been reflected in our 6th five-year plan as well as the long-term perspective plan, which runs from 2010 to 2021. Now, these are the major macroeconomic indicator, or the goals by major macro indicator under 2006 five-year plan, which terminates in 2015, and the target for 2021, the terminal year of the perspective plan. Now, the major points are that the objective is to grow, have GDP growth at 8% by 2015 and 10% in 2021. And it requires huge investment, 33% by 2015 and 38% by 2021. Now, the big question is that whether Bangladesh will be able to generate that amount of investment. Now, if you look at 1 year, in the benchmark year 2010, our national savings rate were 30% of GDP, but we could only invest 24% of that amount. So in 1 year, we have, or some of the year, we have already achieved those savings rate, but we could not translate those savings into investment that is required for higher growth rate. Okay, so what could be the strategy to achieve those things? I think the underlying strategy that we, conceive in Bangladesh, that we have to, this will be based on a productive and competitive manufacturing sector with a nearly double-digit growth rate over the next 10 years. And this is possible. We are having now 9.7% to 10% growth rate for the last 2-3 years in the manufacturing sector. And within the manufacturing sector, I think the export will be the major driver of those things, major driver in terms of manufacturing sector. And what the underlying policies are that we have to have strengthened regional cooperation or the global integration of the Bangladesh economy, and also building necessary trade-related supply side capacities. Now, I think I have to cut short some of these things, but one of the things that we are contemplating is to forge a better relation in the regional context as well as global context through different forums, and also having, improving the trade facilitation issues. Now, one of my colleagues was involved in a study to assess what could be the gain between India and Bangladesh if we improve the transit and trade facilitation efficiencies. Now, if you can see that, they use what we call more technical thing, a gravity type of model, which is the econometric model. And they found out that a 10% reduction in trade-related documentation could lead to a 7.3% increase in bilateral trade between India and Bangladesh. A 10% improvement in efficiency of clearance process would, including customs, might lead to a 4% increase in bilateral trade. So these are good numbers for both India and Bangladesh. And Bangladesh, on the basis of that, is thinking of improving the relationship with India through transit and other issues. But there are more other issues, I mean, in terms of previously we are talking about transit from the political perspective. Now the discourse has changed and we are now talking about the economics of transit as well. Now, what are the major constants that we see in Bangladesh? One, to start with, is inadequate infrastructure. Now, I have put some numbers here, but this is not exhaustive. One can see that the electricity power consumption in Bangladesh, half of South Asia, and only 10% of the East Asian average. So we have to catch up big time in this one. And there are a lot of reasons for why we have lagged behind in infrastructure, but that is also pulling our investment, private sector investment in Bangladesh. Now, this is big. I mean, two reasons for the gap in infrastructure. One is that steady decline of public sector investment in relation to GDP in the recent year, and government failure to attract private investment in infrastructure area. Now, these are two graphs showing that how much of infrastructure investment would be needed in Bangladesh in the next 10 years. And one thing is that it will be around 4.5 to 6% of GDP, which is a big number. Our public investment so far been 6% of GDP. So now we are talking about 6% of public investment or the investment only in infrastructure area. And we thought that, this will be done mainly through FDI because, or the private sector investment participation, because given the trend of falling overseas development assistance, we have to look for FDI and the private sector participation to have the investment required for the infrastructure. Now, if you look at the FDI inflow in Bangladesh, this is the single most policy failure in Bangladesh. We could not attract 1 billion FDI in a single year so far. So that's a big question whether Bangladesh will be able to attract another 3 to 4 billion FDI over the next decade or so for the infrastructure investment. So this is a big challenge for us to how to finance this investment gap. Another important issue that despite having a moderate GDP growth rate of 6 to 5%, Bangladesh has one of the lowest tax GDP ratio in the world, only 10%, which is less than a lot of African countries and also our neighboring countries. So there is the area where we have to do much better. There are lots of reforms are undergoing in both in direct and indirect tax area, and tax administration also. And in the recent year, the revenue growth has picked up around 20 to 30%. So we are hopeful that by 2020, the tax GDP ratio or tax effort will be raised to 20%. And the last point is that, despite having this moderate growth, we are having political uncertainty. We are supposed to have election in 1 year, in early 2014, but we don't know what's going to happen. So there are uncertainty in the political sphere also. And that is, I think, holding private investment also. People are not investing at this point because they want to look what's going to happen, whether all the parties will participate in the election or not. And the low implementation capacity in the planning sector. And then there are problems with institution also. So these are the area where we also need to have effective governance and to achieve some of the growth targets that we have prescribed in the plans. So I will conclude. I think I'm within the time frame. I will conclude with the two things. One is that I think we saw that there are two growth paths we have experienced. One is a subdued growth path, and one is more optimistic and moderate. And one can say that in the context of Bangladesh, a relatively high growth path. And the objective is to achieve 8 to 10% growth over the long term. And now there are optimism in Bangladesh. People are highly optimistic, as far as I know. But there are also genuine concern in Bangladesh that in terms of the performance of the governments. We do have democratic government for the last 20 years, but but they have been failed to deliver. And this perception is also strong that whether in the next generation, the coming generation, the government will be able to deliver to remove some of the structural bottlenecks and then allow us to have the growth rates. Thank you very much.